The morning sun peeked through the blinds as Robert Chen stared at the resignation letter on his desk. This was the fifth one this month. Another good worker gone from the main warehouse of Chen Shipping and Logistics, the company he had built, from nothing but a second-hand delivery van and determination. Robert ran his hand through his dark hair, now streaked with gray at the temples. 23 years of hard work had transformed his tiny delivery service into a respected regional company with 5 warehouses and over 300 employees. He had always prided himself on creating a place where people wanted to work. But something had changed. "I just don't understand," Robert said, looking up at Priya, his operations director who had been with him since the early days. "Our pay is competitive. The benefits are good. Why are so many people leaving the main warehouse?" Priya placed another folder on his desk. "Exit interviews. I've highlighted the concerning parts." Robert flipped through the pages, reading the highlighted sections. Difficult work environment, unfair treatment, lack of respect. He looked up. These are all pretty vague. Nobody's giving specifics. "They seem afraid to," Priya said quietly. "And it's mostly the newer hires who leave. The ones who've been here less than 6 months." Robert stood up and walked to the window overlooking the parking lot. Trucks with the Chen Shipping logo were being loaded for the day's deliveries. From this distance, everything looked like it was running smoothly. "Have you sent in HR? Maybe we need some team-building exercises or—" "We've tried." That Priya interrupted. "HR reports everything looks fine during their visits, but the numbers don't lie. Our turnover rate at the main warehouse is 3 times higher than our other locations, and it's getting worse." Robert turned back to his desk and picked up the most recent resignation letter. The employee, a young woman named Lynn who had shown great promise, hadn't even given 2 weeks' notice. She simply stopped coming in. "What about the night shift?" Robert asked. "Are we seeing the same problems there?" "The night shift has the highest turnover of all," Priya confirmed. "Almost 40% in the last quarter." Robert sat down heavily in his chair. He had built this company on respect for every worker, regardless of their position. The thought that someone might be undoing that legacy made his stomach knot. "I need to see what's really happening," he said finally. "Another surprise visit?" "We've done 4 this year." "No." Robert tapped his fingers on the desk. "They see me coming. Everything changes when the boss is around. I need to experience it as an employee would." Priya raised her eyebrows. "You mean—" "I'm going undercover," Robert said, the idea forming as he spoke. "I'll work as a loader on the night shift for a few weeks. See what's really going on when nobody knows I'm watching." "You can't be serious," Priya laughed, but her smile faded when she saw the determination in Robert's eyes. "Rob, you haven't worked the floor in years, and everyone knows what you look like." "Not the newer employees," Robert pointed out. "And we can fix the recognition problem." The next day, Robert sat in the back room of his old friend Tomas's costume shop. Thomas had worked in theater production for 30 years and knew all the tricks of transformation. "Hold still," Thomas instructed as he applied spirit gum to attach a subtle prosthetic that slightly widened Robert's nose and altered the shape of his jawline. "This is theatrical grade. It'll hold up to sweat and won't look fake up close. Bear?" Watched in the mirror as his appearance slowly changed. Thomas had already dyed his hair a solid gray, given him a slight receding hairline, and added glasses with non-prescription lenses. "The key is changing how you carry yourself," Thomas explained, stepping back to examine his work. "You stand like a boss, straight back, confident. You need to slump a little, and that distinctive walk of yours too recognizable. We need to give you a slight limp." For the next 2 hours, Robert practiced moving differently, speaking differently, even laughing differently. By the end, he barely recognized himself. "Who am I looking at?" he asked, staring at his reflection. "Meet Ray Wilson," Thomas said with satisfaction. 58 years old, looking for part-time work after being laid off from his factory job of 30 years. 3 days later, Ray Wilson was hired as a temporary night shift loader at Chen Shipping's main warehouse. Robert had worked with Priya to create the necessary paperwork while keeping the circle of people who knew about the plan incredibly small, just Priya, Thomas, and Robert's wife. On his first night, Robert sat in his car in the employee parking lot, wearing worn jeans, a faded blue sweatshirt, and the fake wedding ring Thomas had suggested as part of his disguise. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his heart pounding in a way it hadn't since he'd pitched to his first major client 2 decades ago. "You can do this," he muttered to himself. "It's your company. You should know every part of it." As he walked toward the employee entrance, he practiced his limp, keeping his shoulders slightly hunched. A group of workers were huddled near the door, finishing cigarettes before their shift. They barely glanced at him. Robert took a deep breath and pulled open the heavy metal door. The familiar smell of cardboard, machine oil, and sweat hit him immediately. But for the first time in years, he wasn't entering as the boss everyone recognized. He was just Ray, the new guy at the bottom of the ladder. A heavy-set man with a clipboard stood just inside, checking people in. His name tag read, "Greg. You the new temp?" Greg asked without looking up. "Yes," Robert answered, remembering to use the slightly deeper voice he had practiced. "Ray Wilson. Locker 47. Time clock's over there. Don't be late punching in or it comes out of your pay. Orientation starts in 5 minutes in room B." Robert nodded and moved toward the locker area, trying to look like he was taking everything in for the first time. As he found locker 47 and stowed his small bag inside, he felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. He was about to see his company through completely different eyes. What he would discover in the coming weeks would change everything, not just for him, but for every person who worked at Chen Shipping and Logistics. 3 nights into working as Ray Wilson, Robert's body ached in ways he'd forgotten were possible. Muscles he didn't even know he had screamed with each movement. 20 years behind a desk had definitely softened him. Still, he pushed through the pain, determined to understand what was happening in his warehouse. By the 4th night, Robert had started to see patterns emerging. The warehouse actually ran quite smoothly during the first hour. Workers joked with each other, helped one another out, and the atmosphere felt positive. But everything changed the moment shift supervisor Hank Bowman walked in. Hank had been with Chen Shipping for 15 years. He'd worked his way up from a driver to become one of the most senior floor managers. Robert had always seen him as reliable, if somewhat distant, during their brief interactions at company events. But the Hank that Robert now witnessed was nothing like the man who smiled and nodded respectfully whenever the boss was around. This Hank moved through the warehouse like he owned it, clipboard in hand, eyes narrowed and looking for mistakes. "Break's over. Back to work," Hank shouted, though the break timer still showed 2 minutes remaining. Everyone scattered, rushing back to their stations. Robert was assigned to work with Lily, a quiet young woman who had recently graduated from college. She moved quickly and efficiently, but kept her head down and barely spoke. They were loading refrigerators onto a truck when Hank approached, his heavy footsteps making Lily's shoulders visibly tense. "Well, well," Hank said, looking at his clipboard. "Looks like you're behind schedule again, Lily." "We're only 5 minutes," she began. "Did I ask for excuses?" Hank cut her off, his voice loud enough for nearby workers to hear. "Maybe if you spent less time daydreaming about whatever they taught you in that fancy college and more time actually working, you wouldn't drag down the whole team's numbers." Robert watched as Lily's face flushed red with embarrassment. Around them, other workers stared at the floor or busied themselves with tasks, clearly trying to avoid becoming Hank's next target. "I'm sorry, Mr. Bowman," Lily said quietly. "I've been working as fast as I can." "Not fast enough." Hank leaned closer. "One more slow night like this and we'll have to reconsider if you're really cut out for this job. Plenty of people looking for work these days who'd be grateful for the opportunity." He turned away, then called over his shoulder, "And Wilson, stop covering for the weak links. You want to last beyond your probation period, old man? Focus on your own numbers." Robert bit his tongue, fighting the urge to reveal himself right then and there. As the boss, he could fire Hank on the spot. But that wouldn't solve the deeper problem. He needed to understand how widespread this behavior was. Throughout the night, he observed similar interactions. The other night supervisors, Paula and Tony, seemed to follow Hank's example. They targeted newer employees with public criticism, impossible demands, and thinly veiled threats. Meanwhile, they joked and relaxed with employees who had been there longer, creating a clear divide in the warehouse culture. Around midnight, Robert took his meal break in the dingy break room. The vending machine hummed loudly in the corner, and the microwave smelled of burnt popcorn. He sat alone at a small table, watching the dynamics play out around him. The room itself was divided. Newer employees clustered together at one end, speaking in low voices, while longer-tenured workers lounged comfortably at the other, laughing loudly at inside jokes. After a few minutes, Lily cautiously approached his table. "Mind if I sit?" she asked softly. Robert nodded, curious. "Don't worry about what Hank said," she whispered once she'd settled in. "They always pick on the new people. It's like some kind of twisted initiation." "Does it ever stop?" Robert asked, keeping his voice low. Lily shrugged. "From what I can tell, if you last about a year, they ease up. Then you become part of the in-group. Some people even start treating the newer folks the same way they were treated." "That's awful," Robert said, genuinely shocked. This toxic cycle had developed right under his nose. "Most don't stick around that long," Lily replied. "My roommate quit after 2 weeks. I'm only staying because I need to save enough for my mom's medicine before I look for something better." The night wore on, and Robert continued to observe. He noticed how Hank and the other supervisors actually slowed down work by making newer employees nervous. People made more mistakes when they were constantly looking over their shoulders. Near the end of the shift, Robert was sorting packages when he overheard Hank, Paula, and Tony talking in what they thought was a private corner. "That new guy Wilson," Paula said. "Think he'll last?" "Old-timer like that?" Hank laughed. "Give him a week. These temp workers are all the same. Soft, not like us. Besides, I've already got his replacement lined up. My brother-in-law needs a job." "What about the college girl?" Tony asked. "Lily? She's on thin ice," Hank said dismissively. "Too soft-spoken. Thinks she's smart because she has a degree. But she'll learn who really runs things around here." "Not Chen, that's for sure," Paula snickered. "Guy's clueless about what happens on night shift." Robert felt heat rise in his face. He'd built this company from nothing, pouring his heart and soul into it. He'd always believed in treating people with respect. Now his own employees were creating a toxic environment and laughing about how oblivious he was. As the night shift ended and dawn broke, Robert clocked out, his mind racing. What he'd seen explained everything. The high turnover, the vague complaints in exit interviews, the difference between day and night shifts. People weren't leaving because of the work itself or even the pay. They were leaving because of how they were being treated. Walking to his car, he spotted Lily getting into an old, beat-up Honda. She looked exhausted. Robert made a decision. He wouldn't reveal himself yet. He needed to understand the full extent of what was happening, to build trust with the newer workers, and to see just how deep the problem went. One thing was certain: the company he'd worked so hard to build had developed a cancer in its culture, and he was going to cut it out, root and branch. Over the next 2 weeks, Robert fully embraced his role as Ray Wilson. His body gradually adjusted to the physical demands of warehouse work. The aches that had nearly crippled him during the first week faded to a dull background pain. His hands, once soft from years of desk work, developed calluses. He found himself falling into bed each morning when he got home, sleeping deeply until late afternoon. What surprised him most wasn't the physical toll, but how completely the warehouse workers accepted him as one of their own. Without his expensive suit and the title of owner, he became invisible to the supervisors and a potential ally to the newer employees. During his 3rd week undercover, Robert was moving boxes of electronics when he noticed Hank berating a young man named Diego for a shipment error that clearly wasn't his fault. "I checked the inventory sheet twice," Diego tried to explain. "The numbers didn't match the order form." "Are you calling me a liar?" Hank stepped closer, using his height to intimidate. "You think I don't know how to read an order form after 15 years? Robert could see the paper trembling in Diego's hand. The young man had only been working at the warehouse for a month. No, sir, but the computer system doesn't make mistakes. People make mistakes. Hank snatched the paper from Diego's hand. This is your second screw-up this week. One more, and we're going to have a very different conversation. Got it? Diego nodded, eyes downcast. Yes, sir. As Hank stalked away, Robert moved closer to Diego and quietly picked up a box alongside him. Not your fault, Robert said softly. I saw the order come in. The inventory numbers were wrong in the system. Diego glanced around nervously. Doesn't matter. Hank's buddies run the inventory department. They never take the blame for anything. Has it always been like this? Robert asked, trying to sound casual. From what the other guys tell me, it got worse about 2 years ago when Hank got promoted to night shift supervisor. Diego carefully arranged boxes on a pallet. Before that, people actually liked working here. 2 years. That was around the time Robert had stepped back from day-to-day operations to focus on expanding the business. He'd promoted from within, trusting his senior staff to maintain the company culture he'd built. That evening during break, Robert sat with a small group of newer employees. Over stale vending machine sandwiches, they shared their stories. I have a degree in supply chain management, Lily said. I took this job to learn the industry from the ground up, but I'm already looking elsewhere. Life's too short to be talked to like that every day. I'm staying because I need the health insurance for my kid, Diego added. She has asthma. But now I document everything. Take pictures of all the order forms with my phone. The way they talk to us, it's not right. Another worker, Bao, who had been quiet until now, looked up from his noodle cup. My cousin works at the West Side warehouse. Says it's completely different over there. Supervisors actually help when you have a problem instead of yelling. Robert felt a mix of pride and sadness. At least not all his warehouses had developed this toxic culture. But his flagship location, the heart of his company, had become a place people dreaded coming to work. Has anyone ever reported them? Robert asked carefully. The bitter laughter that followed told him everything. To who? Lily asked. HR reports to the regional manager who plays poker with Hank every weekend. And the owner? Mr. Chen probably has no idea what happens on night shift. We're just numbers to him. The word stung more than Robert expected. He'd built this company promising respect for every employee. Now he realized how far that vision had eroded when he wasn't looking. That's not fair, Robert found himself saying. Maybe the owner doesn't know. Bao snorted. Rich guys like that don't care about people like us. As long as the numbers look good, why would he bother checking how the supervisors treat people? Robert wanted to defend himself, to tell them about all the programs he'd started over the years. The scholarship fund for employees' children, the emergency assistance program, the profit-sharing plan. But Ray Wilson wouldn't know those details. So he stayed silent, the bitter truth of their perception settling into his stomach like a stone. Later that night, Robert volunteered to help Lily with a difficult shipment of gym equipment. As they worked together, he noticed she had developed a clever system for organizing the oddly shaped boxes. That's smart, he said, genuinely impressed. Makes it a lot faster. Lily smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. Thanks. I actually have a whole method for organizing the loading sequence based on destination and package size. Could save about 20 minutes per truck if we implemented it. Have you shown the supervisors? Her smile disappeared. I tried once. Paula told me they've been doing this the same way for 10 years and don't need some college kid telling them. Their business. As the night progressed, Robert observed more interactions that explained why good employees were leaving. He watched Paolo, a supervisor, take credit for fixing a conveyor belt issue that Bao had actually solved. He saw how the more experienced workers would deliberately leave the heaviest items for the newer employees. Most disturbing was how the supervisors had created an unofficial hierarchy where new employees were given the most difficult assignments, denied overtime opportunities, and subjected to constant criticism. Those who endured this treatment long enough eventually earned the right to join the inner circle, perpetuating the cycle of abuse. It was like watching a strange workplace version of hazing. Near the end of the shift, Robert was struggling with a particularly heavy shipment of auto parts when Diego came to help him. "Don't let them see you falling behind," Diego warned quietly. Paula wrote up 3 people last month for performance issues. All of them had just questioned how overtime was assigned. Robert nodded his thanks. "How do you keep going knowing they're treating you unfairly?" Diego shrugged. "My daughter. Every morning when I get home, she's just waking up. She gives me this big smile and suddenly, none of this matters." He adjusted, his grip on a heavy box. "But I'm still looking for another job. Just being smart about it, you know?" Robert did know. These were good people trying to make a living, trapped in a toxic environment that he had unknowingly allowed to develop. As the owner, he had failed them by becoming disconnected from the day-to-day reality of his business. Walking to his car after clocking out, Robert made a decision. He wouldn't just observe anymore. It was time to act. The question was, how to address the problem without exposing his identity too soon. He needed more evidence and he needed the workers' trust. Because when he finally did reveal himself, he was going to change everything. During his 4th week as Ray Wilson, Robert witnessed a series of incidents that pushed him to his breaking point. The night began with a small victory. Lily had managed to implement part of her loading system on her truck without the supervisors noticing. She was beaming as she finished 20 minutes ahead of schedule. "See?" she whispered to Robert as they moved to their next assignment. "I told you it would work." Robert smiled at her enthusiasm. "You should be running this place." "Yeah, right," she laughed. "Maybe in another company, not with this management." They were interrupted by Paula's sharp voice. "Wilson, Chen Electronics shipment needs to go out. Bay 12. Robert nodded and headed to Bay 12, where a mountain of boxes waited. He checked the manifest and realized something was wrong. The inventory count was off by nearly 30 items, high-end tablets that should have been included but weren't on the shelves. He double-checked the system on a nearby terminal. According to the computer, all items had been received and should be in stock. Robert had seen this pattern before from his management perspective. This was likely a theft issue, not a clerical error. As he was verifying the discrepancy, Hank walked by. "Problem, Wilson?" he asked, eyes narrowed. "Inventory count doesn't match the shipment," Robert explained. "We're short almost 30 tablets." Hank glanced at the manifest, then at the computer screen. A strange expression crossed his face, something between annoyance and nervousness. "System glitch," Hank said dismissively. "Happens all the time. Just ship what you have and make a note on the manifest." Robert frowned. "But the customer is expecting the full order. Shouldn't we at least check the overstock area?" "Did I ask for your opinion?" Hank snapped. "Just do your job and stop trying to be the hero. These shortages work themselves out." As Hank walked away, Robert noticed him pull out his phone and text someone urgently. Something wasn't right, but he couldn't risk blowing his cover yet. He made a mental note to have Priya check the warehouse inventory records for patterns of shortages once this was all over. Later that evening, Robert was walking by the supervisor's office when he overheard a heated conversation. "We need to be more careful," Paula was saying in a low voice. "If Chen ever does a surprise inventory check—" "He won't," Hank replied confidently. "The man hasn't set foot in this warehouse after 7 p.m. in years. Besides, we've got systems in place. Everyone's taken care of." Robert moved on before they could spot him, his mind racing. Were his supervisors stealing from the company? It would explain the strange inventory discrepancies he'd noticed in quarterly reports. Just before midnight, Lily gathered her courage and approached Paula with her loading system idea. Robert watched from nearby, pretending to organize shipping labels. "Ms. Rivera," Lily began, her voice professional but nervous. "I've developed a more efficient loading system that could save about 20 minutes per truck. I've already tested it, and it works really well." Paula looked up from her clipboard with a bored expression. "We've been doing this the same way for 10 years, Lily. We don't need college theories here." "It's not a theory," Lily persisted. "I've already proven it works. If you just take a look at the data—" "Listen," Paula cut her off, her voice taking on a dangerous edge. I don't need some kid who's been here 5 minutes telling me how to do my job. You think you're smarter than everyone else because you have a fancy degree? This is the real world. Keep your head down and do your work the way you're told. Lily's face flushed with humiliation as nearby workers glanced over. I was just trying to help improve things, she said quietly. If we want your help, we'll ask for it, Paula replied coldly. Now get back to work before I write you up for wasting company time. Robert felt a familiar anger rising in his chest, the same feeling he'd had as a young man when his first boss had stolen his ideas and claimed them as his own. He'd vowed never to run a company like that. Yet here it was, happening under his nose. The breaking point came 2 hours later. There was a mix-up with an order. 2 pallets had been loaded onto the wrong truck. It was a simple mistake, easily fixed. But Hank assembled the entire shift crew and singled out Diego for a public dressing down. This kind of carelessness cost the company thousands, Hank shouted, his face red with exaggerated anger. Do you think money grows on trees, Diego? Do you think Mr. Chen wants to throw away profits because you can't read a simple shipping label? Robert watched Diego clench his fists, the young man's face burning with humiliation in front of his colleagues. Diego had nothing to do with the mix-up. He'd been working in a completely different section of the warehouse when it happened. Actually, Diego said softly, I was working in receiving when those pallets were loaded. I wasn't even... Are you talking back to me? Hank stepped closer, towering over Diego. You want to be unemployed? Because that's where this attitude leads. There are 100 people who would be grateful for your job. Something in Robert snapped. 23 years of building a company where people were supposed to be treated with respect. 23 years of believing in dignity for every worker. And now this bully was using his name to threaten a hard-working young father. That's enough, Robert said, stepping forward from the gathered workers. A hush fell over the warehouse. No one ever interrupted Hank during one of his tirades. Hank turned slowly, his expression a mix of surprise and anger. What did you say? Wilson? I said that's enough. Robert straightened his posture, unconsciously dropping the stooped stance he'd adopted as part of his disguise. Diego wasn't even there when the mistake happened. I was helping load those trucks and the labels were confused in the system. It wasn't his fault. Hank stepped closer, looming over Robert. You've been here, what, a month? You don't understand how things work yet. Mind your own business if you want to keep this job. Robert looked him directly in the eyes, no longer hunching to appear shorter. Actually, I've been here 23 years. A confused murmur ran through the watching workers. Robert reached up and peeled away the prosthetic pieces from his face, wiped away the makeup that had grayed his hair. He took off the glasses and stood at his full height. My name is Robert Chen. I own this company. The warehouse fell completely silent. Hank's face drained of color. Paula, who had been standing nearby, took a step back, her clipboard clutched to her chest. Mr. Chen? Hank stammered. I can explain. Robert held up his hand. Save it. He looked around at the shocked faces of his employees, some confused, some hopeful, some afraid. For 3 weeks I've worked alongside you, Robert said, addressing everyone. I've seen how this warehouse really operates when management isn't watching. I've seen the disrespect, the bullying, and the theft. He turned back to Hank. And I've seen how my name is used to threaten good people who are just trying to do their jobs. Diego stood frozen in shock. Lily had her hand over her mouth. Bao was smiling slightly. Everyone back to work, Robert said firmly. Except you. 3. He pointed to Hank, Paula, and Tony. You 3 in the office now. As the supervisors slunk toward the office, Robert caught Lily's eye and gave her a small nod. The message was clear. Things were about to change. The changes at Chen Shipping and Logistics began the very next day. Workers arrived for their shifts to find notices posted throughout the warehouse. Emergency all-staff meeting, 7 p.m. Word had already spread like wildfire. The owner had been working among them for weeks, disguised as a temporary worker. Some didn't believe it. Others wondered if they had said something they shouldn't have. Most were simply curious to see what would happen next. Robert spent the day in back-to-back meetings, first with his executive team, then with HR, and finally with his legal department. By afternoon, he had a clear picture of just how far the problems extended. The inventory discrepancies went back nearly a year. Exit interviews showed a pattern of complaints that had been minimized or buried entirely. The toxic culture had even begun to affect customer service, with late shipments and errors increasing over the past 6 months. At precisely 7 p.m., Robert stood on a small platform in the center of the warehouse. Workers from all 3 shifts had been asked to attend, with overtime pay for those who came in early or stayed late. The room was packed, buzzing with nervous energy. "Thank you all for coming," Robert began, no longer wearing any disguise. "For those who don't know me, I'm Robert Chen, the founder and owner of this company." A murmur went through the crowd as people who hadn't heard the rumors realized what was happening. 3 weeks ago, I became concerned about the high turnover rate at this warehouse. Instead of sending in consultants or holding focus groups, I decided to experience the working conditions myself. With the help of a theater friend, I became Ray Wilson and worked alongside many of you on the night shift. He paused, looking across the sea of faces. Some looked nervous, others hopeful. What I discovered was deeply troubling. I founded this company on principles of respect, honesty, and opportunity for all. What I saw over the past 3 weeks showed me how far we've strayed from those values. For that, I owe all of you an apology. Robert stepped out from behind the podium, speaking more personally now. I built this company from nothing but a single van and a dream. As we grew, I became too removed from the day-to-day operations. I trusted people who didn't share the values this company was founded on. That stops today. He gestured to the side, where Priya stood with a tablet ready to take notes. I want to share some immediate changes. First, Hank Bowman, Paula Rivera, and Tony Wells are no longer employed by Chen Shipping. After a review of inventory records, we've also discovered significant theft. Criminal charges are being filed. A wave of whispers spread through the room. Second, I'm creating a new position, employee advocate. This person will report directly to me, not to HR or regional management. They'll be responsible for ensuring all employees are treated with respect and have their concerns addressed. I've asked Lily Chen, no relation to me, he added with a small smile, to take this position based on the leadership qualities I observed during my time here. Lily, standing near the front, looked stunned. The workers around her patted her back and whispered congratulations. Third, we're implementing a new loading system company-wide, developed by Lily, which will reduce physical strain on workers while increasing efficiency. Initial tests show a 15% improvement in loading times. Robert continued, his voice growing more passionate. Fourth, I'm promoting Diego Fuentes to night shift team lead. His attention to detail, willingness to help others, and integrity under pressure make him exactly the kind of leader this company needs. Diego, holding his phone to record the meeting for his wife, looked up in shock. A smile slowly spread across his face as coworkers clapped him on the shoulder. These are just the beginning of our changes, Robert continued. Over the next month, I'll be personally reviewing every policy and procedure in this warehouse. But I can't do it alone. He gestured to a large board that had been set up near the entrance. I'm establishing an employee council with representatives from all shifts and experience levels. This council will meet with me bi-weekly to discuss concerns and suggestions anyone can apply. The only qualification is a desire to make this workplace better for everyone. Robert walked through the crowd as he continued speaking, making eye contact with workers. We're also implementing an anonymous reporting system that goes directly to my office. No one should ever fear retaliation for speaking up about problems or suggesting improvements. He stopped near Bao, who had mentioned his cousin's better experience at the Westside warehouse. Additionally, we're standardizing practices across all 5 warehouses, adopting the best policies from each. And we're increasing pay for night shift workers by 12% to recognize the additional challenges of working nights. The announcement was met with scattered applause, which quickly grew in volume. Robert held up his hands. There's more. We're launching an education reimbursement program and creating a clear path for advancement within the company. No more mysterious promotions based on who you know. From now on, it's about what you know and how you treat people. 3 months later, Robert stood in the same spot addressing a different warehouse. He was keeping his promise to personally visit each location every quarter. What I learned during my time working alongside the night shift transformed how I see this company, he told them. Chen Shipping isn't about trucks or warehouses or shipping routes. It's about people. Every one of you deserves respect, opportunity, and a workplace you can be proud of. Back at the main warehouse, the changes were already showing results. Employee turnover had dropped dramatically. Efficiency was up. Even the always grumpy Frank from accounting had admitted the new policies were making a positive difference. After the meeting, Diego approached Robert as he was heading to his car. "My daughter drew this for you," he said, handing over a colorful crayon drawing of what appeared to be a warehouse with happy stick figures. Robert smiled. "She's got talent. She wants to be a business owner like you someday," Diego said with pride. "I told her how you worked alongside us to understand what was happening." "Why did you do it?" Lily asked, joining them. "Most company owners would have just hired consultants or something." Robert looked thoughtful. "Because you can't understand another person's experience until you've walked in their shoes, or in my case, their steel-toed boots." He grew serious. "I'm sorry it took me so long to see what was happening, but I promise you this, it won't happen again." 1 year later, employee turnover at Chen Shipping had dropped by 60%. The company was featured in a business magazine for its innovative approach to company culture. The article ended with an anonymous quote from an employee. "Working here now feels like being part of a family. We look out for each other and everyone's voice matters, from the newest hire to the owner himself." Robert kept the article framed in his office alongside a worn pair of steel-toed boots, a reminder of the lessons he'd learned on the warehouse floor. "Best investment I ever made," he often told visitors who asked about the boots. "They taught me that the view from the top is never as clear as the view from the ground."